Welcome back to the deep dive. And normally when we sit down to do one of these, I've got, I don't know, a massive stack of papers in front of me.
Right. You usually have your whole desk covered in highlights and notes.
Exactly. Yeah. I've got charts. I've got data sets, maybe some new sociological study or a historical breakdown of some big event. We usually approach things from a bit of a distance, right?
We do, yeah. We kind of orbit the topic.
Right. We look at it through a telescope almost. It feels, it feels academic.
Safe.
Yes, exactly. Safe. We can analyze the statistics and crack a few jokes and figure out what it all means for the world at large without necessarily getting our hands dirty.
Safe is definitely the right word for how we usually operate here. Because we like to look at the world through that telescope because it keeps the messy, the really painful stuff at a comfortable distance.
Yeah.
It allows us to just intellectualize things. But today is different.
Today is very, very different today. I don't have a stack of papers. I don't have a peer-reviewed study from some major university. I have one single source.
Just one.
It's just one. It's a blog post. It was published very recently, actually, in May of 2025 by a writer named Lindsay-Michele. And the piece is titled, "The Night I Didn't Die Broken, But Breathing."
That title alone just...
I know, it grabs you. And I have to be completely honest with you and with everyone listening right off the top here, I had a really, really hard time getting through this one.
Me too. It is an incredibly heavy read.
Not because it's poorly written. I mean, in fact, it's hauntingly beautiful, but because it felt less like reading a story and more like witnessing something.
Yeah, witnessing is the perfect word.
It felt like I was intruding on a moment of absolute raw vulnerability. I literally had to put my screen down a few times just to take a breath.
I know exactly what you mean. I had the exact same reaction. There's actually a specific term for what Lindsay's doing in this piece, and I think it's really important we frame this whole deep dive around this concept before we even get into the narrative itself.
Okay, let's do that. What's the term?
It's called somatic writing.
Somatic. But, coming from the root word soma, right? Meaning of the body.
Precisely. So most of us, when we write or when we speak, we are operating from the head. We're processing information intellectually. We write what we think about what happened.
Right. We organize it. We categorize it. We make it palatable for an audience.
Exactly. But somatic writing is completely different. It comes straight from the nervous system. It bypasses the intellect and the logic centers, and it aims straight for the gut.
Wow. Okay.
When Lindsay describes her experience in this post, she isn't just summarizing the events of 2009 like a reporter. She is actively recreating the physiological state she was in. She is transferring the sensation of the trauma directly to the reader.
That explains so much. That explains why I felt physically tense while reading it. I caught myself about halfway through the post, and my shoulders were basically up to my ears, and my jaw was completely clenched.
Yeah, you were holding your breath, weren't you?
I really was. I had to force myself to exhale.
That right there, that is the transfer of feeling. That is the entire goal of somatic writing. It isn't just to inform you. It is to make your nervous system resonate with the writer's nervous system.
That's incredibly powerful, but also
uncomfortable.
Extremely uncomfortable, yeah.
But that discomfort is the point. When she describes the physical shock of a blow or the sensation of waking up on the floor, she is using language to trigger a sympathetic physical response in you. You cannot understand the reality of what she survived if you just stay in your head. You have to let it hit the body.
And that really is our mission for this deep dive today. If you're listening, we aren't just recounting her story for the sake of drama. We want to understand the reality of domestic violence, not as a statistic, because, I mean, we all know the statistics, right?
Right. We've all seen the PSA billboards.
We know the numbers are bad, but numbers are dry. We want to dive into this as a lived, lingering experience. We want to analyze how this author, Lindsay, completely dismantles this really popular myth that leaving equals healing.
That's a huge one, the happily ever after narrative.
Yeah, that idea that once you walk out the door, the credits roll, the music swells, and everything is just magically fine.
It's a dangerous myth because it sets survivors up for absolute failure when they don't immediately feel better.
So true.
We're also going to explore the massive disconnect between how society views survivors, which is often with judgment or dismissal, and how survivors actually experience themselves, which is often through this lens of fragmented identity and just lingering fear.
So let's unpack this. Let's start at the very beginning of her piece, or I guess the before. Because one of the most striking things about this post is how she sets the scene of her life before things got really dark.
She takes us right back to 2009.
Yeah, 2009, and she's 20 years old.
20, just barely out of her teens. I think it is so crucial to pause on that age for a second. Think about who you were at 20 Think about your brain at 20.
Oh, man, I would really rather not, to be honest. I was a complete disaster at 20.
We all were. We really were. But biologically, that context is everything here. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that is responsible for long-term planning, for risk assessment, for complex decision-making, it isn't even fully developed until your mid-20s.
Right. So at 20, you're basically
operating largely on emotion, on novelty seeking and social connection.
Yeah.
You are naturally naive.
And hopeful.
Extremely hopeful. You have this inherent sense of invincibility. And Lindsay is very honest about her own misconceptions at that age. She openly admits, quote, "I didn't know it was abuse," end quote.
Which is so heartbreakingly honest. She had this caricature in her head of what an abuser looked like.
Yes, she thought abuse meant constant fear.
Right. She thought it meant a guy who was just angry 24/7, controlling every single move, giving off this like mustache twirling villain energy, like a cartoon bad guy.
But that is almost never how it actually starts.
No, it's not what she found at all. She describes him as fun, charming, and the person I loved, and that is the trap, isn't it? That massive cognitive dissonance.
It is the ultimate trap. And it's exactly why so many people who are outside of these relationships don't understand why someone stays. We look at it from the outside and we think, well, if he hit her, why didn't she just leave?
Right. It seems so simple from the outside.
Because we are assuming the abuser was a monster all the time. If the abuser was a monster all the time, leaving would actually be biologically much easier. Your fight or flight would be permanently engaged and you would just run.
You'd run from the predator.
Exactly. But what Lindsay describes here is a textbook case of intermittent reinforcement.
Okay, let's chew on that term for a second because it's important. Intermittent reinforcement. That sounds like something straight out of a psychology textbook or maybe a dog training manual. What does it actually mean in the context of a romantic relationship?
So it's a concept that comes directly from behavioral psychology, specifically B.F. Skinner's work with rats and pigeons.
Okay, the Skinner box.
Right, the Skinner box. Imagine a rat in a box with a little lever. If the rat presses the lever and gets an electric shock, every single time the rat stops pressing the lever very, very quickly, it learns a simple rule. Lever equals pain.
Simple enough. Stay away from the lever.
Right. Now imagine if the rat presses the lever and gets a little food pellet every single time. It learns lever equals food, so it presses it whenever it's hungry.
Makes perfect sense.
But what if you change the rules on the rat? What if the rat presses the lever and sometimes it gets a shock, sometimes absolutely nothing happens, and sometimes just occasionally it gets a really delicious treat?
The rat gets confused.
Worse than confused. The rat becomes completely obsessed. It will press that lever until it physically collapses from exhaustion.
Wow.
Because the unpredictability of the reward creates a massive, massive spike in dopamine in the brain. It's the exact same physiological mechanism behind slot machines and gambling addiction.
So translating that to a relationship.
It looks like a partner who is charming, loving, and absolutely wonderful until they suddenly aren't.
Huh.
And then, without warning, they are wonderful again. Lindsay wasn't staying for the violence. She was staying for the man she loved, the food pellet, hoping the violence was just a glitch in the system.
A glitch. God, that is a heart-breaking way to put it, but it makes total sense. She was addicted to the hope of the good version of him returning. And she describes that first glitch, that very first strike, with such incredible precision.
She really does.
She says, quote, "The shock hit me before the pain did. That single sentence really stuck with me. The shock hit me before the pain did."
That is a perfect example of that somatic writing we were talking about. Let's break down the physiology of that exact moment.
Please do, because I want to understand how that works.
When unexpected violence happens, especially from a source of assumed safety, like a partner, the brain simply cannot process the data fast enough. It is literally a system error.
So physically speaking, what is happening in her body? Because nerves transmit pain signals pretty fast, right? How can the shock arrive before the physical pain?
Nerves are incredibly fast, yes, but the brain's prediction model is even more powerful. Your brain is constantly predicting what is going to happen next based on past patterns.
Okay.
If you're sitting with a partner who is fun and charming, your brain's predicting safety. So when a physical blow lands, your brain encounters a massive prediction error.
It just doesn't compute.
Exactly. It creates a state of instant dissociation or freeze. We always talk about fight or flight, but freeze is actually the most common response to an immediate overwhelming threat from an intimate partner. It's called a dorsal vagal shutdown.
Dorsal vagal shutdown.
That sounds intense.
It is deeply intense. It's an ancient evolutionary mechanism. Think about a prey animal. If a predator has you in its jaws struggling, might actually trigger it to kill you faster. So the body just goes limp.
It plays dead.
Yes, it shuts down pain receptors temporarily. It numbs you to prepare for death. When Lindsay says the shock hit her first, she is describing that biological freeze response. She literally couldn't comprehend that it had really happened because her reality, the reality where he loves her and keeps her safe, had just entirely shattered.
It's like reality just shifted on its axis. One minute they are just being us. That's the phrase she uses, just being us. And the next, his hand is on her face. It's the suddenness that seems to do the most psychological damage initially.
Mm-hmm. It's not just that she was hit. It's that the world, she understood the fundamental rules of her relationship, just evaporated in a split second.
Precisely. And look at what happens immediately after the strike. This is the classic script of the cycle of abuse. The perpetrator's reaction.
Right.
He doesn't double down. He doesn't stand there and say, I hate you because I hate you. What does he do?
He cries. He falls completely apart. He blames the alcohol. He creates this entire scene where he is somehow the victim of his own mistake.
And this confuses the victim's survival instincts even more. If he were acting like a predator, if he were menacing, she might run.
Yeah.
But he is acting like a wounded child. He is apologizing profusely. He is promising it will never, ever happen again.
And she believes him. And reading it as an outsider, you just want to reach right through the screen and grab her by the shoulders and tell her, no, don't listen, run, get out of there.
Of course you do.
But she writes, quote, I wanted to believe him because I didn't know any better. That tragedy of innocence just radiates off the screen. She clearly feels so protective of that younger 20-year-old version of herself.
Because she was operating on a logic that works in normal, healthy relationships.
Which is?
If someone you love hurts you by accident, and they cry, and they apologize, you forgive them. That is what love does. She applied the healthy logic of love to a deeply unhealthy situation of abuse.
She just doesn't have the data yet.
Right. She didn't have the data set to know that this was the beginning of a terrifying pattern. She truly thought it was an isolated event. She thought, okay, this was a terrible, horrible mistake, but we can fix it.
And so she went back.
She went back.
And this is where the story shifts from just being about this one couple to being about the entire world around them. And honestly, this is the part that made me angry. Actually, angry is a total understatement. I felt genuinely furious on her behalf reading this section.
It's infuriating to read.
She talks about the switch flip in perception. She goes back to him, and suddenly the way her friends and the people around her treat her just completely changes.
This is a critical sociological point she's raising here, and it's one we just do not talk about enough in society. We all like to think that if we saw a friend in trouble, we would rush in to save them, right? We would be the hero.
Right, we'd stage an intervention, we'd get them out.
But Lindsay notes that once she forgave him, it was like she gave everyone else in her life permission to stop caring. She says, quote, it was as if my decision to forgive him made it okay.
Yeah, and the reaction she got from them wasn't support. It was total dismissal. She talks about people shrugging off bruises and making light of the situation. I mean, can you even imagine?
It's chilling.
You are 20 years old. You have visible physical bruises on your body, and the people in your life, your friends, your social circle, are joking about it or just ignoring it completely because you're still with the guy. How does that happen? How do human beings do that to someone they care about?
It's incredibly uncomfortable to admit, but it's a profound defense mechanism for the observers. It is deeply tied to what psychologists call the just world hypothesis.
The just world hypothesis.
Yes, the idea that bad things only happen to people who somehow deserve them. Or the idea that if a situation was really actually that bad, the person would simply leave.
I see.
Because think about it. If her friends actually acknowledge that those bruises are serious, that they are evidence of a violent crime and a literal threat to her life, then they have a moral obligation to intervene.
And intervention is messy. It's dangerous.
It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
Intervening means directly confronting a violent abuser. It means telling your friend she is dead wrong about her relationship. It means getting deeply involved in a high-conflict, potentially lethal situation.
So they just look away.
It is much, much easier subconsciously for society to just say, well, she stayed. So it can't be that bad. It's just their drama. They're just involved a couple. They minimize the abuse so that they don't have to feel the discomfort and the guilt of their own inaction.
But the damage that does to the victim, I mean, think about the profound isolation of that. It's not just that she is alone with him behind closed doors. She's alone in her entire reality. She starts to think, well, if they aren't worried, maybe I'm the one making it a bigger deal than it is.
Yes, that is the feedback loop of self-gaslighting.
Self-gaslighting.
We usually describe gaslighting as something the abuser actively does, manipulating the victim into questioning their own sanity. But here, Lindsay brilliantly describes how the social reaction forced her to gaslight herself.
She internalized their dismissal.
Exactly. If the whole world says this is fine and her own body is screaming this is dangerous, she eventually learned to suppress her body to align with the world. She trusted the group consensus more than her own nervous system.
And that leads straight into this trap of minimization. She starts internally telling herself things like, it wasn't constant or I can handle it. It's like she's actively negotiating with her own survival instincts, justifying it like, okay, he hit me, but he bought me a nice dinner today, so we're good.
I can handle it is a survival mantra that eventually just becomes a prison. By aggressively focusing on the calm periods, the good times, she is desperately trying to maintain a coherent narrative of her life.
Because the alternative is just too dark.
The alternative, admitting that the person she sleeps next to every night is an active danger to her life, is too psychologically shattering to hold on to every single minute of every day. If you lived fully in that reality 24/7, your brain would just collapse.
So you compartmentalize.
You have to. She creates this mental scale where the good somehow outweighs the bad, even as the bad is getting progressively more physically dangerous. She is compartmentalizing the violence just to survive the day-to-day of the relationship.
And it really does get dangerous. It gets literally life-threatening. Which brings us to the section of the blog post that is unequivocally the hardest to read, but arguably the most important piece of the whole puzzle.
The night.
She calls it the night. And she doesn't shy away from a single detail. She forces us to look right at it.
She doesn't let the reader look away, and honestly, we shouldn't look away either. This is the ultimate somatic flashback we talked about earlier. This is where the writing completely stops being a narrative story and starts being a full-on sensory assault.
She describes waking up on the floor. If you're listening, just picture that for a second. Waking up on the hard floor, she is lying in a pool of her own blood. Her hair is tangled with broken glass. There are actual chunks of hair missing from her scalp. Her face is swollen and throbbing. I mean, just saying those words out loud right now, I get a pit in my stomach. It is so visceral.
It's absolutely horrific, and I want you to notice the incredible specificity of those sensory details. It's not just visual. It is deeply tactile, tangled with glass, throbbing. She is forcing the reader to physically inhabit that broken body with her, because this is the exact moment where the mental minimization completely fails. You can minimize a dark bruise. You can explain away a slap as a loss of temper. You absolutely cannot minimize waking up in a pool of your own blood with chunks of your hair missing. The sheer physical reality of the violence finally overwhelmed her brain's ability to deny it.
She talks about the realization of mortality in that specific moment. It wasn't just, this is a bad situation anymore. It violently shifted to, I might not survive the night.
That is the critical threshold. That is the moment the existential threat becomes undeniable. She realized she had officially run out of chances. Her quote is, I realized that if I didn't leave, I might not survive the next time.
That shift is huge.
It is. That shift from managing emotional pain to raw biological survival instinct is very often the final catalyst for leaving. It's no longer a relationship decision. Do I want to be with him? No, it's a life or death decision. Am I going to live?
The prefrontal cortex might be offline, but the amygdala, that lizard brain, is just screaming, get out, run! And she mentions in the post that she still carries actual physical scars on her face from that specific night. They're like a permanent timestamp on her body. Even if she wanted to forget it, the mirror reminds her every single day.
Those scars serve as a physical bridge. They continually connect the woman she is today, the writer, the survivor, with that terrified 20-year-old woman on the floor in 2009.
It anchors her.
It absolutely prevents that total detachment we talked about earlier. She can't just move on and pretend it didn't happen, because the actual map of that night is permanently written on her skin. It is a daily forced confrontation with her own history.
So she leaves, she gets out, and this is the part of the movie where the uplifting music usually starts playing right. She packs her bags, she walks out the door, she's free. The audience cheers, the credits roll. But Lindsay writes about what happened after she left.
And it is not the liberation story anyone expects.
Not at all. It's dark. It's really messy. She talks about putting on what she calls the party girl mask.
This is such a fascinating and tragically common misunderstanding of trauma, both by the survivor themselves and by society at large.
Right.
Because she leaves, but the pain doesn't just stay behind in that house. The pain packs its bags and comes right along with her. She writes, I wasn't drinking to party or have fun. I was drinking to forget.
But everyone else just saw a party girl. They saw someone going out, hitting the bars, drinking too much, maybe being a bit messy or highly emotional, dancing on tables, whatever it was. and they labeled her wild or fun. They honestly thought she was just celebrating her newly single freedom.
They did, but inside she was completely drowning. It is the massive gap between external behavior and internal intent.
Can you explain that?
Sure.
Yeah.
The external behavior was excessive drinking and partying, but the internal intent was anesthesia. She was desperately trying to numb the somatic flashbacks, the crippling fear, the guilt, the shame.
Just trying to turn the volume down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a classic maladaptive coping mechanism. Because when you remove a person from a highly traumatic environment, their nervous system doesn't just instantly calm down and realize it's safe.
It doesn't know it's out of the woods yet.
Right. It is still firing on absolutely all cylinders. High alert, panic hypervigilance. It is literally like a car engine just revving and revving in neutral. She used alcohol to chemically force her highly activated nervous system to just shut up so she could sleep.
It's basically the functioning alcoholic trope, but applied to a traumatized 20-something girl. And the real tragedy of it is that nobody stopped to ask why. No one looked at this sudden dramatic shift in behavior of this girl who went from being completely isolated in a controlling relationship to suddenly being out of control at bars every night and thought, hey, is she okay?
No one asked.
No one asked, is she hurting? They just assumed, oh, this is her new fun personality.
It speaks volumes about how deeply uncomfortable we all are with pain. It is so much easier for a friend group to label someone a fun party girl than to accurately label them a traumatized survivor who is self-medicating to avoid suicidal ideation.
God, when you put it like that.
One is a fun, easy archetype, right? The other is a massive, heavy responsibility for the entire community. If she's just partying, we can just drink with her. If she's actively dying inside, we actually have to stop and help her do the hard work of healing.
And Lindsay writes so beautifully about the profound loneliness of that specific time, being seen by everyone but not known by anyone, screaming for help with your destructive actions, but having everyone around you interpret those actions as just having a really good time. It must have been incredibly isolating to be the literal life of the party and feel completely dead inside.
She says, quote, "I didn't know who I was without trying to numb myself."
Such a heavy statement. It's a total identity crisis.
It is. Because the abuse systematically took away her physical safety, and the aftermath took away her sense of self. Trauma completely deconstructs your identity. You spend so much time just surviving, just constantly scanning the room for threats, managing the abuser's volatile emotions, that you completely forget how to exist as an individual human being.
You just become a mirror.
You lose your preferences, your hobbies, your own voice. And then when you add the thick layer of substance use on top of that to numb the pain, you enter this sort of fugue state. You aren't actively building a new life. You are just desperately trying to endure the old one that is still playing on a relentless loop in your head.
So she had to completely rebuild her sense of self from the absolute ground up, starting from zero.
From less than zero, really.
And this leads right into the present day portion of the essay. And this tackles the great myth of moving on. We all have this ingrained cultural expectation that healing is a straight line. You get hurt, you grieve a little bit, you heal, you're done. Let's wrap it up in a bow.
Right. We love a clean timeline.
But Lindsay talks about how much it still physically hurts when people say things to her like, well, it couldn't have been that bad, or the absolute classic, at least you're out now, so why dwell on it?
Why dwell on it? That specific question reveals such a fundamental, massive misunderstanding of how memory and trauma actually function in the human body.
Yeah.
She isn't actively choosing to dwell on it.
Right, it's not a hobby.
No. She isn't waking up and thinking, I think I'll be sad about 2009 today.
Sure.
The memory literally lives in her bodily tissues. When people casually dismiss her experience, she says it transports her right back to that floor with the glass.
It's a trigger.
Yeah.
But let's actually take a second to explain what a trigger genuinely is, because I feel like that word gets thrown around so much on the internet these days, it's almost lost its meaning.
It really has. People use it to mean something that annoys them. But a true somatic trigger is a profound biological event. When someone casually invalidates her pain, when they say, oh, it wasn't that bad, her body instantly registers a mortal threat. It flawlessly mimics the exact feeling of being completely helpless. It mimics the feeling of that specific night where she had zero control and absolutely no voice.
So her body thinks she's back there.
Yes. So a casual offhand comment from a friend or an acquaintance at a coffee shop can physically send her right back to a state of absolute primal terror. Her heart rate spikes, her palms sweat, Her brain gets completely flooded with cortisol. It cruelly forces her to physically relive the worst moments of her life just to justify to someone else why she is still hurting.
And the craziest part is she admits in the post that she still doubts herself.
Yeah.
Even after the blood, even after the permanent physical scars, she writes, quote, "Maybe I really did make it worse than it was. That self-doubt is so incredibly persistent. How is it even possible to doubt something that literally left scars on your face?"
It's the direct result of years of intense psychological training. She trained herself to relentlessly minimize the abuse just to be able to stay in the relationship and survive. She practiced the art of denial every single day for years. That specific neural pathway in her brain, the one that says, it's not that bad, don't make a scene, it doesn't just magically grow over with grass because she moved into a new house. It is a well-worn 8-lane superhighway in her brain.
That makes total sense. The brain defaults to the easiest path.
Always. So even now, years and years later, she finds herself automatically softening the truth to avoid sounding dramatic to other people. She is actively managing the comfort of her listeners at the severe expense of her own reality.
That is just heartbreaking to think about. She's protecting the listener from the horror of her own lived experience, just so she doesn't seem attention-seeking or a burden.
Which is a very, very common fear for survivors.
Yeah.
The deep fear that if they tell the whole truth, the really messy, bloody, non-linear, ugly truth, people will just turn away in disgust. They fear being, quote-unquote, too much.
So they edit themselves.
They do. They present the PG-13 light version of their trauma. But Lindsay, in this specific blog post, is flat-out refusing to edit anymore. That's exactly why this source is so incredibly powerful. She is breaking that unwritten rule. She is showing the raw, unedited footage.
And she mentions physical triggers, too, not just conversational ones. Things like loud voices or suddenly feeling trapped in a room.
Because the body remembers what the mind desperately tries to rationalize. She has this brilliant line. The scar's healed on the outside, but the way I question myself hasn't.
Yeah, that line hit hard.
The hypervigilance she experiences jumping out of her skin at a loud noise, always needing to sit facing the exit door in a restaurant, panicking when someone stands just a little too close to her. It is all her body saying, I remember exactly what happened last time, and I am preparing you to survive it again.
It's a biological sentry.
It's a survival mechanism that is no longer useful, but the body just refuses to turn it off. It's a sentry that refuses to leave its post, even though the war ended over a decade ago.
So we've gone through the history, the trauma, the horrific aftermath, the biology of it all. Now we finally get to the core message. Because towards the very end of the post, Lindsay does something really interesting. She stops telling her story and she sort of turns to the camera, so to speak.
She breaks the fourth wall.
Yes, exactly. She addresses the reader directly. She says, quote, if you're reading this...
This is the massive pivot in the piece. She beautifully shifts from a personal memoir narrative to offering collective validation. She is finally offering the reader the exact thing she never had when she needed most permission.
Permission to be out, to be safe, and to still feel completely, totally broken.
Yes.
She writes, just because you left doesn't mean it's over. And she makes it so clear that that is okay. That deep validation of the anger, of the confusing thoughts, of the lingering daily pain, it honestly feels like she's reaching through the screen and giving the reader this firm grounding hug. Like, I see you. I know you're tired.
It is the absolute resolution of her entire narrative arc.
Yeah.
Think about it. She spent the entire first half of the story frantically seeking external validation.
Looking to her friends who just shrugged her off.
Looking to a violent abuser who just lied to her face. But now she is generating her own internal validation and generously offering it to anyone else who needs it. She states so clearly, your truth is enough. You don't have to convince anyone else.
Your truth is enough. That is such a profoundly powerful takeaway. If you're listening right now, you don't need a jury to vote on whether your pain was quote-unquote bad enough. If it hurt you, it was real. You do not need to show everyone your scars to prove that you felt the blade.
Exactly. And she completely embraces this concept of duality. Look at the title of the post again, Broken, but Breathing.
Right.
In our modern culture, we always want people to be one thing or the other. We love our clean binaries.
You're either the victim or the survivor.
Right. You are either a victim who is broken, sad, and helpless, or you are a survivor who is healed, strong, and empowered. Lindsay is standing there saying, no, I am both. I am breathing. I am alive. I am out of that house. But I'm also broken. I am also carrying the heavy weight of that night every single day.
And she argues that you can exist in that muddy middle space. You don't have to be completely, quote-unquote, fixed to be a worthy person.
That is a profound psychological shift. It completely takes the pressure off the survivor. You don't have to constantly race to this imaginary finish line of perfect healing. You can just exist. You can just focus on breathing.
It honestly reminds me of the Japanese art of kintsugi. Have you seen that?
Oh, where they repair the broken pottery with gold.
Yeah, exactly, where they fix the shattered pottery with gold lacquer. The break is still very much there. It's highly visible. In fact, it's highlighted, but the object is whole again. It's totally different than it was before it was dropped, but it's whole and it's functional.
That is a truly beautiful analogy for this. And for someone who literally thought she was going to die on her living room floor just breathing is a massive, massive victory. It is a monumental daily achievement. Every single breath she takes is an active act of defiance against the person who actively tried to extinguish her life.
So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's just go back to that title one last time. The Night I Didn't Die. It sounds like an intense action movie title, but reading the actual piece, it feels much more like a ghost story.
It really does.
It's about the very real ghosts that follow you home after the trauma is supposedly over.
It summarizes the entire journey so perfectly. From the initial confusing haze of young, naive love, through the explosive violence that completely shattered her reality, to the dark party girl phase where she just desperately tried to outrun her own mind, and finally to this present-day reality.
Where she's standing her ground.
Yes, she is a survivor who is still actively fighting for complete ownership of her own narrative. She is consciously living with her ghosts, acknowledging that they are in the room, but absolutely not letting them drive the car anymore.
It really makes you stop and think about how we listen to people in our own lives, how we observe the people right around us. I know for me, the next time someone tells me they are struggling with something from their past, or even if I just see someone acting out in a way that doesn't immediately make sense to me, I think I'm going to pause.
We all need to pause more.
I think I'm really going to try to look past the surface behavior.
We absolutely need to stop waiting around for the perfect victim to show up. We need to completely stop expecting survivors to be consistently calm and logical and perfectly linear in their healing.
Because trauma is messy.
It is so incredibly messy.
Yeah.
It is ugly. Healing is not a straight upward line. It is a spiral.
Yeah.
You continually circle back to the exact same pain, but hopefully with just a little bit more perspective each time you come around.
And man, we really needed to stop with the empty platitudes. The phrase, "at least it's over," needs to be officially retired from the English vocabulary immediately.
Absolutely retired forever. Instead of saying, well, at least it's over, maybe we should try saying simply, I believe you. Or it makes total sense that you are still hurting today. Or even just, I am right here with you.
I believe you. 3 incredibly simple words, but they genuinely change everything for a survivor.
They do. They actively counteract years of deeply ingrained gaslighting. They firmly anchor the traumatized person back in reality. They basically say your experience is entirely valid.
So here is a thought to leave you with today as we close out. We walk past people every single day. People in the aisle at the grocery store, people sitting next to us in our offices, our close friends, the people laughing the loudest at the bar on a Friday night. We only ever see the after version of them.
Just the polished exterior.
Right. We see the person who is upright, walking, talking, maybe laughing and smiling. But how many of them are secretly walking around with invisible glass still tangled in their hair? How many people in your life are broken but breathing, just desperately waiting for anyone to acknowledge that just breathing is incredibly hard work?
That's the real question.
When we see someone acting messy or quote-unquote dramatic, are we just quickly judging the external behavior, or are we actually brave enough to look for the invisible ghosts they might be fighting?
It is absolutely a question worth asking yourself. Because if Lindsay's incredibly brave story tells us anything, it's that the person who is smiling the absolute brightest at the party might actually be the one fighting the hardest, darkest battle of all.
Lindsay-Michele, if you ever hear this, thank you so much for writing this piece. Thank you for being brave enough to put that raw somatic experience into words for the rest of us.
Yes, truly thank you.
And thank you all for listening to this deep dive today. We know it wasn't an easy one to get through, but we really hope it was a deeply meaningful one. Take good care of yourselves. Definitely check on your friends, and we will see you next time.
Be well, everyone.
Bye for now.
So, if this resonated, you could follow Through the Looking Glass for more of these deep dives. And if you want the full episodes, my main show is Down the Rabbit Hole Unfiltered. And you could follow wherever you're listening, and I'll see you there.